Okay, so we're going to use the online chat as well. So if you can just test the chat here, you can see my screen and say, yes, you can see my screen.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
can you also use can you also use the chat room as well? Just like, and if you can see the chat and type in
Yes.
yes. Okay, fantastic. All right, good, good, good. All right. So appreciate you doing online. I don't know if any of you have done online classes like this, and so obviously not like the face-to-face, but we'll try to make it as engaging as possible. So the first thing I want to do is I do want to talk about the personal inventory. I had asked you to list your strengths and list your liabilities. Why do people like you? And what are some things that we need to work on? So what I'd like you to do is just real quickly, I just want you to start typing in things that why do people like you? What are some of the things that make you a strong person, or what makes you positive? So if you guys can kind of just start, let's spend about 2 or 3 minutes just kind of type. Just want to see some responses there. There's got to be a couple of you that fill this thing out. Let's say this just so let's. I'm going to wait a couple more minutes and then we'll go through it. Okay, I'm not sure if any of you have been able to do the assignment, or if maybe the chat's not working. But if some of you can also put, what are your assets, what are your liabilities? Okay, well, the purpose of doing this exercise is that what basically, so okay, they're good. Some people are putting accessible, a good listener that I put. A lot of people put that good listener. That's great. So think about how this to negotiations. So think about, how positively impact, and think about that as a person. Sometimes we try to be something that we're not in the negotiation. We talked about this in class, how we'll see some people that are emotives try to be directors. We'll choose try to see a reflective being an emotive. And the things that your true person will always come out during these negotiations. So for me, I've sure kind of that same aspect that I'm a pretty good listener. I'm pretty adaptable as far as how I communicate. Liabilities, that's probably the biggest issue of what we have here. And the biggest issue that we have, is for me, for the liability, is I can be quite impatient. And so I don't know if I told the story before of my friends giving me feedback and how they didn't want to get a vacation house with me, saying that I was quite temperamental. And so when I learned this about from my best friend, I my communication style, but at times that I could be impatient. And so that's something that I needed to work on, because whatever holds you back in life will hold you back in business. And sometimes your manager is not going to point that out to you. And so that's why I asked you to give this to your friends or your colleagues or your roommates, because they know you better. And also, too, sometimes we perceive ourselves as different. I give the example of one of my students who thought he was funny. And and he said he thought it was a strength when his roommates said they thought he was sarcastic. And he said he learned a valuable lesson about that. And I've kept in touch with this student over the years, and he's doing very well at a technology company. And he says he learned a valuable lesson because he always thought that humor was his key to success, and he realized that his humor sometimes could come off as arrogant and sometimes sarcastic. So I encourage you guys to do this exercise. Again, you guys have gone through some multiple role plays, and sometimes we can see those positive and negative impact from ourselves in the negotiation. So hopefully this exercise, you guys, I haven't been able to see a lot of people online contribute. Again, this is a safe area, so if you want to put yourself as anonymous, you can. But for the people that I've shared, I do appreciate that. Okay. If you can, if some people can also just test out to make sure that this is that the chat is working. So I'll type a question. Okay, good. All right, well then let's. Okay, all right, fantastic. Well, then let's make this engaging and short. What I'll do is I'll get this to 9:45 and maybe a little at 10. I want to get others in this class as well. Okay, so the agenda today, we're going to cover chapters 6 through 8, and also the case study, the diplomatic culture. So when we look at chapter 6, what if they are most powerful? So I want you to think about this, because in a lot of situations, they are going to be a lot more powerful, especially earlier in career. And so what are the things that we don't want to do? Well, first, when we see that they're more powerful, we want to make sure that we protect against our agreement. And second, we want to work on our BATNA. So one of the things that a lot of negotiators do is they use this bottom line approach, right? Which, okay, this is the bottom line. This is the least past. This is the least that I can accept as an offer, and this limits his options and really kind of holds back an imagination. We don't ever want to start a conversation that way. When we're talking to our managers and we're brainstorming ideas, let's not use the bottom line. This concept to negotiated agreement, and we're going to test this out on our face-to-face class on Tuesday when we go through this. We're going to go through a simulation. We're going to split the team, the class up into teams, and I'll give up the scenarios, and I want you to discuss as a team what is your best alternative to negotiated agreement, not what is the bottom line approach. And this is positive for everyone. So the BATNA is basically, it allows us to be more prepared and go into our meeting, produces obviously better results, and it's our own standard, right? The client, but a standard at which we stand by, and provides flexibility and gives us the confidence to go into a negotiation easily and more prepared. So when we go into a situation, a lot of times with no BATNA, it'll take away our optimism, and also it makes us sound desperate. So we've got to make sure that we have a BATNA going into it, and we've got to learn how to develop that. Also, I really like about the concept of a tripwire, right? So basically, it's basically a true measure of your proposed agreement, right? So it throws you some margin in reserve. So what that means is that, okay, are we below our BAT? If we are, $100,000 away from a negotiation, is that tripwire $100,000? If we're looking at a job negotiation, and our tripwire is if they go below, $40,000, that could be a tripwire. So, again, the more you take the time to take a step back and say, what is my BATNA? It creates a greater power for you. And that is, when we look at our power, we want to see what our power is against, the other people that are across the room. It's what is their other side of their BATNA? So what is the individual that we're dealing with? Is their BATNA more powerful than us? So when we look to develop your BATNA, it's no different than when we're brainstorming, right? We invent a list of actions. First we look at the problem. What is the scenario that we're looking at here? So, for instance, we'll look at a house. So I always use my house as I went through 3 transactions last year where I sold 2 homes and I bought a house. And so, you know, there was one house that I had to sell, and there was one house that I could have sold but also rented. So you look at these BATNA. So my BATNA for my one house was I was going to sell the house at a certain price, but completely furnished with all the furniture in it. That was my BATNA. I couldn't lower my price on that house. My house and the BATNA on my other house, which was in North Carolina, was I was going to sell it at a certain price. If I didn't get that price, I was going to rent it. And we had a buyer that constantly came. Their first offer was $50,000 on this, and I just refused to negotiate. It wasn't based on objective criteria. I thought they were using dirty tactics, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. And so I stuck to my guns because my BATNA was I was going to rent my house, and because I knew that I rented my house, I would actually be making anywhere between $300 to $500 more a month. So it didn't hurt me, though I didn't want to be a landlord. That was my BATNA. Also, when we look at our own personal negotiations, such as a job offer, which is going to be your first one, right? So it's that job offer. What is your BATNA? Is it going back to school versus getting another job, right? Or looking at a location to find a job. For me, when I moved to North Carolina, except in my first professor job, I had multiple job offers to work on Wall Street once my other position did not work out. And my BATNA was to move to another state if the other jobs weren't to my liking. And that's basically what I did. And so when we do is we look at these BATNAs just like brainstorming. We list them. We look at the promising ones that we can work on and convert them to practical ideas. And so when we list these BATNAs, we have to ask ourselves: are we confident in our situation? Are you negotiation failing? And should you reveal your BATNA to the other side? Which I did. I told the person, I said, listen, I can't accept any lower than this price. And if I don't get this price, I'm going to rent it out. I'm not that desperate. I released my BATNA. What did that buyer do? That buyer gave me exactly what I wanted. So that person, I'll be very transparent. So I'll sell my house for $280,000, right? It was my first house here in North Carolina. He offered me $230,000. Then he came to $240,000 and $250,000, and I just told the realtor, I said, we're wasting each other's time. I will not accept any $280,000, and because my BATNA is I will rent the house out. If I do not get $280,000, I will rent it out. And when they found that out, they came all the way from $230,000 to $280,000. Now we had to come to some agreement. I had to throw in a couple things, like some furniture, but that wasn't a big deal. So again, I was more flexible. My BATNA was I needed $280,000 or rent. Okay. So when we look at the other side's BATNA, we have to accept the fact that we may have to walk away. What is our walk away point, right? And ask these questions, right? Is it stronger? So for instance, did my other houses that he was looking at, were there other options? Was it realistic? Him offering $230,000 for my house was unrealistic. I knew that my house was actually lower than most of the houses in the development, which is very, very big. And personal level, guys, I want you that for me, if it's not based on objective criteria, then I'm not going to negotiate. So, you need to educate that. So this is very interesting because sometimes you have to, when in real estate, and again, this is just matters, is what my realtor had to do is basically come up with what we call comps or comparisons and say, okay, houses of this size of this, of decor, is going for this amount of money. So what you're offering is really not based on objective criteria. And I basically was at that point, at one point I was so frustrated with this individual that I didn't even want to negotiate anymore because it was such a low offer. Okay, so that's chapter 6. So again, chapter 6 basically talks about don't be afraid to realize that the other party might be stronger. They might have a stronger position. They might have a stronger role. Their relationship to you might be a little stronger. But again, it's based on how you define what your BATNA is. And what this class is about is introducing these concepts. And negotiation is a skill that evolves over time. There's not experience that's going to say, okay, you're a master negotiator. But think about these concepts as we go in. I think that the best weapon to have is that discipline to say, before we go into to play this game, let's make sure that that we go in there with a plan and that we have options for ourselves. So hopefully that makes sense. Next, what I'd like to do is I want to move on to chapter 7. So I don't know if anyone in the class has done martial arts. I actually enjoy this chapter and what they call negotiation jiu-jitsu. I actually do martial arts myself, and the great thing about martial arts is that you're using the other person's strength, against them. And so it's really just about leverage. And so what you want to do is basically you want to concentrate on the merits and rather on the positions. Again, this is we're looking at principled negotiation versus positional bargaining. So the three basic approaches in getting into play. Again, this is kind of the concept of we're going to use negotiation jiu-jitsu, right? Concentrate on the issues, right, not the positions. Focus on what you think they might do. What are some of their attacks? What do you think? How do you think they'll come at you? I've been selling and buying real estate for a number of years, so I always know that counterparties are gonna lowball me, and they're gonna basically lowball, meaning that they're gonna make a low offer, and so I have to basically counter that with showing that, listen, I'm not desperate, and here are my options. If I don't sell this house or if I don't accept your job offer, I have other options. So we always want to be, confidence can be a very, very dangerous thing for the other party. For us, being there confident, knowing that we're not going to be desperate, is going to help us in the long run, right? And focus on what a third party can do, right? You focus on their interests, their options. Also, what is the objective criteria that they have developed? So kind of typical attacks that they might include is one, they may assert their own position, right? So we're talking about something that's completely against principled negotiation. It's not based on merit. It's not based on objective criteria. They may attack your ideas, and they might even attack you, the person, as an individual. And again, what do we do when what do we do when there are outbursts out there? So for instance, I've done some negotiations with some other hedge fund managers, and so one of the things that I've seen is they can have very explosive personalities. So one of those things that I want to do is let them outburst, let them attack, take a step back, and then listen to what their concerns are. We never want to overreact to outbursts. When we do react to them and we do react to what they're doing, we don't want to attack their position. One of the things that we talked about in class is really understanding what their position is all about. How is that created? What is the theory behind that? Why is it they don't think that our offer is fair? And also, don't defend your ideas, right? Invite that criticism and get that feedback. It's amazing what happens when you act as rational as possible, right? I always say that, when we're in this negotiation and that someone is being maybe illogical or emotional, about it as you're playing a role in the movie, right? And people are watching you portrayed in that role. And there's a slide in here that I put in here is when you're being portrayed, do you want to be portrayed as the irrational villain, the person who is emotional and is perceived as negative, or do you want to be perceived as the hero, the cool-headed actor or actress that prevails and is successful because they keep their emotions intact? So I have been asked to slow down. Please provide feedback if I'm speaking too fast. So I appreciate that feedback. Thank you so much. I will definitely slow down. So again, I've already kind of covered this, right? When you're feeling attacked, let them vent. I think it's one of the things that I need to work on. It's something that I always sometimes, if I hear that someone is getting maybe angry at me or is expressing maybe an opposite opinion, I can sometimes be a little bit confrontational, and that is one of my liabilities. I do the same exercise that you guys do, and I do give it to the only person that I really hang out with is my wife, so she actually judges me on certain things. So again, one of the things that I also want to practice, and I hope you practice this on next Tuesday in class, is golden silence. I know it sounds awkward, right? When someone says something and then it's complete silence, right? And it's almost a little bit like a game. So think about that. So when you ask a question about their position or ask some feedback on what you just offered, just pause. It is so hard to do. It is one of the, I've seen people ask a question, the other person is silent, and what happens is that the other person asks another question or starts defending their position. So when we do that, I want you guys that on Tuesday, we'll have that opportunity that when you ask the other person a question, let's stay silent, right? Pause, get that feedback, right? And we focus, we want, again, what we're trying to do here is refocus it from bargaining to problem solving, right? What problem are we doing? Let's go back and say, okay, this is what I want, okay? And one of the other things that we can use that is very, very powerful is one text procedure, which is using a third party. So the third party could be a mediator. It could be maybe if you and the example they give in the book is you and a spouse have an issue over contracting work. So you invite a third party, such as a contractor. So the third party approach can be very powerful as well. In business, what we did in technology is that we have the client, we have the vendor, who the vendor is myself, and we'd have a consultant come in. And when sometimes we'd hire the consultant on our own expense to provide a different perspective on the situation, on what we think might be fair and objective. Is this all making sense? Am I talking too fast? Please let me know if you can respond and say if this speed is okay. Thank you, everyone. So again, when we look, like that third party, a lot of that that option is overlooked. The one text procedure really shifts this negotiating game from those positions, that bargaining game, and it simplifies the process. And both of you having to get together, invent different options, and deciding jointly on which one is the best option for each individual. So there's some really great phrases and these are some that I have forgotten, but these are some really great phrases to get them to express themselves without getting defensive, but at the same time getting them to react. And so this is just kind of a few of them. Please think about these when you're negotiating with someone, whether it's a roommate, a professor, maybe you're making a purchase and it's just not going the way you want. Look at some of these terms that they use. I just want you to kind of read those, and if you have your book in front of you, look at some of these, and you have to use ones that really resonate to you. So I just want to take a few seconds to kind of review this one. So the book has a great example of a tenant who's having a conversation with a landlord, and that tenant basically believes that they've been cheated over the last few months because they've been overcharged in a rent control area. So instead of these individuals attacking and saying, you've overcharged me and you've treated us unfairly, this person's not saying, accusing them. They're using terms that really kind of allow them to explain themselves without getting defensive. Please correct me if I'm wrong. We appreciate what you've done, right? Again, giving a positive, and even, this is great language to use in email as well. In an email, always start with one of these sentences that allows them to explain themselves. This is our concern. Our concern is fairness. We'd like to sell on the basis, right? And if they talk about, well, what, you don't trust me, right? You think I'm trust? Trust is a separate issue, right? We're not talking about trust. We're talking about fairness, right? Again, I love this question. What's the principle behind your action? That's a great question that I always use. What's your principle? What's your theory? What was it? What was the process? That's the one I always use. What is the process that you use to come up with this decision, right? Or this is a great one. One solution might be, and so that's another way of saying, okay, well, here's an idea. Here is an option that we've thought about, right? That we think is fair. And when we use language like this, we're not attacking the other person. So in using negotiation jujitsu, again, insist on the first thing is insist on using objective criteria. That's always the start, right? Always do the research based on where that offer is, whether you're negotiating a partnership, have some, you just can't come up with, if you come up with any type of numbers or any type of agreement, have it backed up by research. Research, here's one thing that I always tell a lot of my clients is you can't argue math. You can't. 1 + 1 = 2. It equals 2 on Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. It's always the same number. So when someone tries to go against your opinion or go against your number, if you can back that up, that objective criteria with statistics or math, it's very, very hard to argue. And if you're basing it on the facts and not something that you're trying to get away with something. Also, make sure before you go into the negotiation, develop your BATNA. What is your best alternative to negotiating agreement? And use the techniques that we just talked about. Use some of those phrases in negotiation jiu-jitsu. Okay, so what I really would like to do is spend a few minutes. Hopefully, you guys read this article. And what I'd like to do is kind of look at these questions. And what we'll do is, there is a question. This is good. A question came in. How do we know when to use the golden silence? That's a great question. And so, golden silence is when we're asking them to make a decision. So golden silence is kind of used when, okay, I'm asking them to take action. So I might say, okay, so for instance, let's go back to my example of the license agreement that I presented in class last week. So for instance, I might say, okay, well, it looks like that there is, that there is a need for our services. We have two pricing models. One is a perpetual license where you'll pay $450,000 with a 3-year agreement, or we can do a 5-year agreement where you pay $100,000 with no increase. And the reason why I'm being quiet is for a reason, right? And so, so the golden silence is what happens is when I see a lot of people in sales, what they do is they basically they'll just start defending it. Well, a lot of our clients are picking option B, but option A is a great option as well. And if we're not, if none of these work with you, then we can be flexible. We can negotiate. All of a sudden, you've taken away all the confidence. Golden silence basically shows that you're comfortable with your situation, and so when the question was, when do you use it? Use it when you're asking them to make a decision, or you're asking them for their position on what you just presented. Does that make sense? Okay, good. So BATNA, it's a good question. If BATNA is like a plan B, gosh, I don't really like it to be, I don't like the BATNA to be considered a plan B. It's really what's best for you. The plan B would be, there's an ideal situation, and then there's, which is, you're getting, my ideal situation was about $300,000 from my house, right? That was the ideal situation. And the BATNA is basically what's best for you. It is another option, but you can categorize it as your plan B as long as that plan B meets your expectations. Because your definition of a plan B can be very different than the other person's plan B. So the plan B was I could have sold my house for $250,000, right? Or my plan B would be I could have accepted a job for $35,000, right? That wasn't it. For me, it was, and I'll tell you from a personal perspective, is I had a salary range that I wanted. If I was going to work on Wall Street, the lowest I was going to accept was a $200,000, base salary. That was going to be my BATNA was that if I did not get that for the right job, I was going to move to North Carolina and have a better quality of life. So it really wasn't a backup plan. It was more of, and it wasn't really a plan B. It was more of a, what was my expectations. Believe me, I probably would have been happy with a $200,000 job as well. That would have been ideal. But when I'm looking at weigh the options, it's really what's best for you. So be careful. It is kind of your backup plan, but be careful when we say our plan B. The plan B has to be in line with our own objective criteria. And because what I don't want is a plan B that weakens your position and weakens your negotiation. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay. So here, this is and this is what I want us to talk about in class. It's very kind of hard to do, obviously, this type of engaged learning online. And I appreciate you guys being flexible and coming online. I really want you to look at this article, Diplomatic Culture or Culture Diplomacy, the role for culture in international negotiation, right? So what I want you to look at these questions. Why is understanding culture so important in negotiations? Obviously, I think we've covered that a lot, right? And it's really understanding, what some of the roles of the individual, what type of culture they are, whether individualistic or collectivism. So I'm hoping you have some really good answers for this from Tuesday. Also, what would be the negative impact and going into a culture and not understanding one culture? So, we go into, I believe there's some students, I don't know if it's this class or last class, talking about talking to individuals from Japan. And so, for instance, I had a colleague of mine who started asking a lot of questions and really tried to negotiate with, it was actually the Tokyo Stock Exchange, and asking a lot of questions, presenting a lot of facts, and before we even build rapport. And rapport building is very, very big in Japanese culture and building that harmony. So this individual really didn't understand the Japanese culture as well. And also they talk about what are the differences in cultures discussed. So there are some key differences. They talk about Mexican culture, Japanese, also French culture is mentioned here, and also, of course, American culture. They do talk about the Soviet Union, but that I would say I would focus on the other cultures. And the other question I really want us to discuss, and again, seeing that this is Schema Business School, it's a very diverse class. I'd love to get your everyone's perspective on have you had any experiences where you misunderstood another culture. I've had some students saying that they thought Americans would be a little more aggressive down in North Carolina. And so North Carolina culture is very different from the kind of typical American northerner, New York, Massachusetts, New Jersey, or someone else misunderstood your culture. So I'd like to see, get your experiences on your interaction with maybe other professors that misunderstood your culture. Maybe I myself have misunderstood your culture. So please read this article and answer all these questions or break into groups, especially the fourth question. I'd really like this because I think we can also learn from the mistakes that we've made where we might have misunderstood another culture. And it doesn't have to obviously be American culture, but any culture in Europe or any culture around the world. I'm just going to type a note to everyone. Make sure we're still alive. Okay. What if they use dirty tricks? So again, this is, for me, and this is one of the things that I need to work with, is usually my principle is if they use dirty tricks, I walk away. All right. Once I kind of acknowledge this, I just kind of move on. So, but that doesn't make you, again, as I've been doing this for over 20 years, and my evolution as a negotiator is still getting better and better. And so this is one of the things that I need to work on and be patient with, is that when that other person is using dirty tricks, like this individual who tried to lowball me and really tried to provide objective criteria that didn't exist at my own house, I thought that was a dirty trick. So here are some of the rules of the game. And when we look at dirty tricks, they lie from psychological abuse or forms of like different pressure tactics, right? Threats. And so, one, recognize the tactics. Like Sue, and it is okay to call them up or call them out on that. Raise that issue. Be upfront about it. Don't be afraid to say, you know what, I feel. Remember we talked about this and saying you're using dirty tactics. I feel that this negotiating agreement has gone a different direction, and I feel that it's gone in a negative direction. Right? Again, tell them how you feel. Question the tactic. Why are we going down this route? Right? And so, what is your goal of going this? This is my, our objective is to solve this problem, right? You want a specific service, a certain partnership, a house. You want a certain employee. Why are we going down this road? And again, we're going to go back to our 4 basic rules, right? Again, and I know that we're almost finished with this book, but I want us to learn. I want us to carry this out through the class into our lives, right? Separate people from the problem, right? The people are the ones who are doing this type of attack. They're using dirty tactics, right? So focus on the interests. Right? Focus on those problems. Invent the options. And again, my favorite rule: go back to objective criteria. Also, walk out. Sometimes if the person is just unwilling to negotiate, this is just something that sometimes we just need. This partnership is not worth doing, right? Use your BATNA. Again, when we talk about our BATNA, and as we called it, our plan, maybe our plan B, our BATNA is based on our own merits. So it's really important to notify ourselves of, okay, when's our turnaround point? When's our point that we know that this is not going to work out and we need to walk away? I'll tell you, for instance, in a real life situation where I worked for a company for Investment Technology Group in New York, ITG, and this was dealing with a global asset manager in New York, and we were in the contract stages, and the contract became a very, very negative and contentious situation, and where every time they came with a new contract, they wanted more. They wanted more. We're at one point, when we gave this to our legal team, we had the legal costs had went up to almost $25,000. That's how much revision that this came out. And so the president of the company, of my company, called me and said, Mike, this is your call. I know this is a big deal. But he asked me, he goes, is this a client we want to do business with? And I said, well, I don't think it is. He goes, well, I'm giving you permission to fire this client. So then we're okay walking away. And so instead of and this would have cost me a lot of money, right? But I had to do what's best for my company, and I had the support of my president. My president said, don't worry about it. If we lose this deal, we'll be fine. I said, okay, as long as I have your support. I went to this client, very rational. I said, we appreciate all the time that you've put into this. It seems that the negotiation has gone a little bit out of hand, and so we're ending the negotiation. And so, and he responded, he goes, wait a minute, you're firing us. You're going to get rid. You don't want our business. I said, no, that's not it. I would love your business. I'd love to have you as a client, but at what price? I said, what I can do is I can recommend another competitor that fits your needs and maybe is more in line with what your criteria is. But at this point in time, we don't think it's a fit, right? I didn't attack them. I didn't say they were being unfair. I just said that this is, that kind of enough's enough, and that this wasn't a good fit. Well, long story short, the next day we got a fax copy of the contract signed. They basically, we weren't threatening them. We weren't going to say, well, if you don't sign this contract, we're walking away from the deal. We just gave our position. Our BATNA was we do not deal with these types of clients. And the client called, we want to grab coffee. We apologized. He goes, I think we let our egos get the best of us, and we just wanted to get as much as we could out of the deal. And they were a great client for a number of years while I was at that company. So sometimes we have to know where our walk-away point is. And for us, the walk-away point is so here's some tricky tactics. Some of it is deliberate deception. phony facts, ambiguous authority, dubious intentions, basically providing less than full disclosure. I don't know if this class or another class, but one student had told me that they signed a contract for a cell phone, and so it was $20. Let's say $20 a month for the first 3 months. What they didn't tell them is that after the 3 months, it went up to $30. That is less than full disclosure, right? So we always have to read the fine print, and I do feel that in American culture, they do that a lot, and I'm not proud of that. That's not something I practice. I would never practice that. Also, psychological warfare, stressful situations, personal attacks, maybe attacks on your company. They might come up right off the bat and talk about a historical perspective on maybe an experience they had with your company, or an experience they might have had with someone in your company. We've also heard the good guy, bad guy, or the good cop, bad cop technique, where someone comes in very understanding and seems to be on your side, and you have someone on the complete opposite end of it. And of course, threats. And so these are things that we have to, we build our BATNA. One of our BATNAs is, we're not going to deal with threats. So think about these tricky tactics, recognize them, and think, okay, and call them out and say, is this this seems like a stressful situation. Can we change the environment, right? I already see that, we have one person who's playing. It looks like there's a good kind of bad kind of situation. You're very good to deal with, and then there's another individual that seems to be very counterintuitive to what our discussions are. Positional pressure tactics, right? I'm not going to negotiate. I will see you in court, right? That's kind of a standard statement that we see when we refuse to negotiate, right? Making extreme demands. The first year of the software for free. You will not get any vacation in that time frame. My apologies. I have a phone call coming into my hotel room. Hold on one second, guys. Okay, so sorry about that, guys. I'm actually in California right now. I'm doing a presentation in about 2 hours. One of the things is extreme demands. We just talked about escalating demands. So what an escalating demand is okay. Well, I'll accept this contract if you give a 20% discount in the first, second, and third year, and it keeps on going. Escalating demands can be very, very dangerous. And again, if you have your BATNA. Right? If you have your BATNA, you can defend against that. And so when I sold my house, they kept on saying, well, can you throw in a refrigerator? I go, no. Just kept saying no. To $880,000, house as is, that's it. Okay, well, can you throw in the microwave? No. Right? I just kept on saying, you're getting a fair offer. There are other houses without these appliances. That's it. Let me see. I just saw a question. Okay. The question is, we saw that Americans sometimes hide information during negotiation. Is it actually a deliberate deception? Absolutely. And unfortunately, American culture, they don't see it that way. And, no one can ever question how you feel, right? They might say that, well, this is the way we negotiate. Well, if you feel you're being deceived, that is something you need to call them out. So, you know what? Based on that information, basically, you may not have lied, but you withhold that information. When you hide information, yes, I absolutely agree with deliberate deception, and that should be called out on. Okay. Lock-in tactics is also very common in international negotiations. So it's when they talk about lock-in tactics, they're basically locking you in a position. And that position might be, where you're kind of stuck, and it really kind of limits what you can do. Also, the hard-hearted partner, where they may have another person say, well, I need to talk to my boss, and so that's also a trick too. That's very common in car sales. I need to talk to my boss. I need to talk to my manager. So we have to just be aware of that. And you know what? We have to be aware of that up front. Usually what I say when we're in negotiations, okay, if we can come up with a solution in place, a partnership in place, what's the decision-making process, right? Because if they say, well, if we can come to an agreement, I can decide right now. Okay, well, guess what? If you say to my business partner, you can basically question and say, well, I'm sorry, I might have misunderstood, but when I asked a question about the process and coming to an agreement, you said yesterday that this was the process, but now why is it that we have to talk to this partner? It's actually a stall tactic, and I find this quite deceptive. That's why it's important to understand what the process is when going in. Calculated delay, so that means the way to counter a calculated delay is choose deadlines. This is very, and this has got to be sensitive about, and I've always had a challenge with this, where if I give a contract to someone, they might be levying your contract against someone else and say, you know what, this is my price, this price will be good until the end of the month or the end of the quarter. And so, and if you sign this contract by this date, we can do this. And so it's not a pressure technique, but basically what it does is it defends you against this calculated delay. And the last but not least, the good old fashioned, take it or leave it. So the take it or leave it is basically, again, a threat. Based on my experience, and what I've seen, this is not something that I don't like being threatened. But as a good negotiator, we have to go back to the problems. Okay, let's take a step back. Sometimes it's just take a step back from the bargaining table and say let's at least agree on some of the things that we've moved forward with. When we negotiate in good faith, I want you to ask these questions, and I already presented some of these, right? Is this approach I would use with friends, right? So we want to, just as we are measuring the others, right? Sometimes it's easy for us to bend some of the rules. And so we want to basically say, okay, am I using a fair approach, right? So we can easily judge the others and say that they're using dirty tactics. And so when we go into situations, when we work for an employer, unfortunately, these employers may put us in unethical situations. And we'll talk about ethics later on in this semester, but I'll just leave it at this when it comes to ethics. Your is you and no one else, okay? Manager's not going to have your back. HR is not going to have your back. The colleagues are not going to have your back, right? I've seen some people really fall when it comes to ethics. I mean, I worked on Wall Street for 14 years, and it was right in front of me. And I've seen some very good people become very, very greedy. And we don't want to become those individuals. We want to base it on our own objective criteria and our own ethical persona. And so when we look at these negotiations, are we acting in good faith, right? When I use this approach with some of the closest people, and what I always like to do, I like to envision the future. Okay, after this negotiation is all over, am I proud of this, right? Will I be embarrassed of the outcome? Now, some of us don't have a conscience, so that's okay, right? But based on what I've seen with the students, and it seems like all of you are good-hearted people, this comes to that, and when you look at yourself in this negotiation, right? Look at yourself as you are in a movie, right? Do you want to be seen as the hero, or do you want to be seen as the villain? And for me, this is not a course on ethics. This is not a self-help class. But one of the things we want to talk about is this in line with my values? And that's one of the things we always have to question. And when we negotiate in good faith, we always want to be prepared. And don't ever fall victim or feel pushed around. I think that is probably the biggest advice that this gives is, when we look about it, right, we don't want to be a victim to a bad negotiation. Okay, so that was the class. Hopefully you found it, I know it's not as engaging as being in face-to-face, but I appreciate your guys' flexibility. And thank you for being online. I know that this is this is a face-to-face class, and I want to make it engaging. Unfortunately, I did have a situation because of the storm that I had something rescheduled. So thank you so much for your participation, and I appreciate you being online. For next Tuesday, we're going to finish up the class in conclusion and 10 questions. We're also going to do we're going to do case study 2, so be prepared to talk about that. Also, case study 3, there's a special report. It's actually a special report by the Harvard Business School, and so one of the questions that I want us to discuss is discuss some of the contracting styles of negotiation mentioned in the article. What are some of the possible cultural barriers a negotiator may face? You know, what should you consider? What are some with a translator? I'll tell my own story of how I had my own translator, and I shared it with a couple of students last week. And why does the article bring up ethical stereotypes? And what would be some examples? And this could be some of those things we can actually tie in with the other article of those assumptions. Now, next week we'll have we will have our class. We'll have I'll have also a negotiation scenario, and so we'll have that as well. And I also will review the exam. So we'll go over the exam for the following week. Okay. So any questions? Okay, so the first exam, it was supposed to be scheduled for next week. It actually the week of that would be the 16th. So it'll be, and I'm actually going to post a revised syllabus. I will post that later this week. And so again, because your class was we had a class canceled, I want to make sure, and I'm teaching both a Tuesday and Thursday class. I want to make sure that you guys are prepared. I don't want to rush some of the content, so I want to make sure that we're supposed to have the exam actually next week, but I want to make sure that we cover all the content. And so next week we'll cover these things, and then we'll have an exam review as well. Does that make sense? Okay. Have a great week. Please feel free to email me. I will have there's some questions coming up on the exam. I'll have all the details of the exam. It will be, what I know right now is it'll be 50 multiple choice. You have the entire class period. I don't think it'll take more than an hour and a half. If it takes you a half hour, then you're done with class. So we'll use the entire class period. Okay. All right, everyone. Have a great week, and feel free to email if anything comes up. All right. Thank you.